Hey, what's up, guys? This book is great, man. Basically, it's a history of everything leading up to cinema. Right? Paul Clee. I got this for like $8, but don't get it on Amazon. They're selling it for like $75. The book is great, very readable, lots of notes, but not. It's not like a friggin' textbook. Lots of illustrations, organized very well. Leading to how each little thing developed. I didn't even know what these were panoramas. I didn't even realize that these things dioramas. I didn't even realize what they were. But of course, magic lanterns I was familiar with, of course, and the old the moving images of the camera obscura. But great book, and it has a relation into explaining in the aspect of historicism coming to these. Now you can argue that what if motion pictures, if visual media was a good thing for humanity in this twilight age, but the history of it going into the past, utterly fascinating. And I like how the writer brings up certain things. Okay, going from the first moving images you saw of something, the camera obscura, where the camera is a room that you go in, of course, to magic lanterns, right? Kind of this guy invented, right, magic lanterns pretty much, which was still popular. I have a Sears Roebuck catalog from 1900. They were still selling them to show like slides, and many of the subject matters of magic lanterns were the macabre, and of course, the famous. There's one of them, right? The phantasmagorias, right? The lantern of fear, but. Yeah. I'll just cover it real quick. In terms of historicism, what's written here really kind of sums up not just film making, but a lot of things culturally. Right? There are several contenders for the title of Father of Motion Pictures, but that fact is that no one person can lay claim to it. There are some who made bigger leaps than others, but it took hundreds of contributions over 3 centuries before a few minutes of film showing a train coming into a station could scare a crowd in Paris in 1895. Oliver Sacks, right? I don't know who that is, a famous contemporary author and neurologist, once wrote, "It was evident that the history of science was anything but a straight and logical series, that it leapt about, split, converged, diverged, took off at tangents, repeated itself, got into jams and corners. In the same way, the road to the movies, and so many other things, was a far from a straight, smooth freeway. Okay, it was more like a country road that starts out as a path in the woods, widens to a dirt road, becomes a highway, with more and more side streets feeding into it as it goes along. Looking back, we sometimes mistake the result of a historical movement for a goal that people living at the time were striving for. From our vantage point, we can see where all the roads led. However, most of the pioneers who traveled these roads had no idea that their work would one day contribute to making movies. They had other projects in mind, particularly when you start to get to the first actual film cameras that could catch moving images, let's say. Many of the guys who had developed those things were scientists trying to study movement of animals, of people, of objects. And that technology eventually led into what we had today. But right, the magic lantern, this was a big one, right? The shadow plays, I mean, they had shadow plays in ancient Europe, in ancient Asia. The magic lantern, when you started to develop glass slides where you show like these images to people, right? I think they say this guy may have been the inventor, but it's one of those things where there's so many people that were doing the same things around the same time. To give credit is hard, but you see right off the bat with him, but this Dutch creator, sketches of skeletons, right? You see that the subject matter in the very beginning for much of this stuff was always the macabre, right? And that's going to tie into, right, there's a shadow play. That's another old little technology. There's an actual magic lantern. I have a Sears Roebuck catalog from 1900 where they're still selling those, right? And you can make the pictures move with the slides, mechanical slides. You can make things like a rat jumping into this dude's mouth, right? And these crazy psychedelic things, right? The what is it? The kaleidoscope, right? The term kaleidoscope is from that, but so like they could be very dangerous. In Paris, like 104 people got killed when one of them got blown up by a big magic lantern. But the lantern of fear, getting into what I always get at in terms of horror, man, these things scared the hell out of people, See the guys grabbing their swords, right? How you gonna fight, the beyond, my friend? But he links it to the 18th century, the Gothic, right? The fascination with the supernatural and the occult, okay, in the 18th century, and he brings up why, right? You get the Gothic novels, the literature. I mean, description here of phantasmagoria, everyone screaming. They had never seen anything like this. And part of the innovation was putting that magic lantern on wheels and using smoke. And there's a play, but look how cool that is, right? That's Strand Theater, right? But here, the other thing I like, okay, the 18th century was a strange mix of superstition and rationality. It was, after all, the period in Western history known as the Enlightenment, when reason and science would banish belief in ghosts and spirits. Enlightenment thinking proclaimed that science would provide a rational explanation for all phenomena. The supernatural was simply the invention of ignorant people to explain what they didn't understand, and magic was nothing more than a bag of tricks. Human reason would eventually provide all the answers, and natural causes would replace supernatural beliefs. But by the late 18th century, there was a growing feeling that this way of thinking was too limited. People didn't want to believe that the supernatural was just a figment of their imagination. They wanted to believe in something larger than themselves. The world described by reason and science was a cold world governed by impersonal mechanical forces. Whatever remained of a supernatural being was reduced to the role of watchmaker who built the machine, then stepped back out of sight and let it run by itself. Many historians see the rise of public interest in the occult and supernatural during the second half of the 18th century as a reaction against the cold scientific explanation of things. Right? Essentially, what I keep saying, as you see an early subject matter of much of these magic lanterns and phantasmagorias and whatnot, it's a pagan reflex. Okay, the Enlightenment essentially takes reality, and the supernatural and the natural are separated. Okay. This stuff in horror films, like I argue, they're a pagan reflex to where the universe is not cold science. Okay? There's meaning to it, even if the meaning is that powerful beings from beyond want to have us as food or playthings. It gives a meaning, right? But and obviously, reading this is hilarious if you look at the vantage point of today. But regardless, that was the really interesting thing I got from this, which really recommends it on itself, right? Look at that. Really cool. These things really scared the hell out of people, right? So, and rounding out, you had this. I was not aware of these panoramas, right? The Industrial Revolution, of course, changes everything. Dark Satanic Mills of Manchester, here Sheffield in this case, right? Look at the old England. But what's interesting is, as you think it develops, obviously they actually still have a cyclorama. Okay, apparently at Gettysburg. I'm gonna check this out. It was kind of like the IMAX theaters of the time. Okay, and of course you have the toys, right? The zoetropes, right? Where little tricks of movement, playing on how the eye operates, would create motion. You know these things, right? Now the real interesting part comes. Obviously, photography is being developed at this time. Okay. The magic lantern meets the photograph. They actually had a magic lantern journal. Interesting. These guys, made money. You really start to get this thing where there's a bet, right? People are trying to determine. They can't agree with what they see in terms of horses. Okay, all the horse racing that was popular at the time. Did a horse's feet? Did all 4 feet leave the ground, or was one still touching at any given time? This guy here decided that they were gonna use photography to figure this out. But the problem was, it's the old photography. You'd have to take it. It would sit. You couldn't catch motion. So his idea was to set up this system here to have 12 to 24 of these cameras film a moving horse at each given time. And the mystery was discovered. Yes, all 4 feet do leave at the time, and it was applied to other things. But it really gets into high gear with this Frenchman here, Etienne, Jules Mailly, right? I'm probably saying that wrong too, but he developed, and these are all scientists, by the way. He developed basically from another guy, okay, this man here, Jansen, a photographic revolver. Basically, and his revolver becomes a rifle. This is one of the earliest film cameras that captures motion, kind of using like a drum, like a revolver or a repeating rifle would have of a certain type. And there it is, right? And aimed with the butt of the shoulder. This enabled this sort of idea when combined with the Zoetrope toy, right? Where you can have the photos move, right? And this is where things really start to take off. And remember, these guys were all scientists. George Eastman's Kodak, right? Now you have film, right? Rather than just wet plates. And real quick aside here, too. The first, wow, look at these diagrams. The first guy, there's a Frenchman here, the first narratives, because we're talking about, you have films of people walking around playing little tricks or watching a horse move. The first narratives with stories and characters portraying a narrative that was shown and moving was not film, it was animation by this man here, Emile Reynaud, right? These are and projecting the film, okay? So essentially, the first films that you had projected that were moving films were animation. I thought that was interesting. Didn't know that. Of course, Thomas Edison gets in there, right? The idea of the moving film. He decides he's going to put it in these little things, these little booths, kinetoscopes, and you're going to put a nickel in there and look at it. But the idea of projecting the film was really where you start to get to the modern film. There's like the Black Maria. For a studio design for making films. Interesting. You get all these guys. William Dixon, his assistant, you have to give a lot of credit to because he probably did more of it than Edison did. Edison wanted all the credit. It's fucking Edison. To be frank, he thought every film should be patented to him, this guy. Meanwhile, there's hundreds of guys, Frenchmen, Germans, Englishmen, all over the world doing this, the Western world, doing this, coming up with their own cameras. Okay, that Frenchman with the animated film, he actually invented the sprockets, the little holes you have in film to keep it running on a track, which is a big problem they had before that man. Right? So it was just interesting seeing how they developed, and of course, Monsieur Méliès, right? George Méliès, right? This guy coming back, he was a magic lantern guy, he was a magician, he was used to doing tricks. He applied those eventually to making films that had eventually, in the 20th century, they decided to develop like actual narratives. Also, he invented the jump cut by accident, and he was able to do things like having people disappear. And my man also did the first moving horror films, and they're very bizarre to see. They are kind of surreal and off-putting. But big George Méliès fan. Of course, Trip to the Moon, right? Journey to the North Pole is actually his epic film. You should see that. I think it's from 1913, before the war. Always the war, the first war. Now, the Nickelodeons, right? Nickelodeons were actually movie houses, right? Opera houses. The old theaters in Brooklyn, I remember as a kid, they were modeled after opera houses. There was the box seats. There was different levels. They had ornate, sculptures in the columns and everything, coming out of that tradition. Nickelodeons were the poor man theater, right? Making cheap entertainment available to the working class people. Now, I'm not going to get all working class hero here, but the biggest fans of horror films back in the day were the working class. Okay, just say it. And the reformers, right? Oh, foreigners gathered in dark day. We're not going to, come on. Those progressives who are so concerned about actually, no, they're not. Some of them are actually cool, but some of them are really the people who are the ancestors of the people today giving us trouble. Because those French filmmakers with their sex and violence, right? And of course, I like to invite the Nickelodeon. They have a playbill. Look, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Look how popular it was with the evil American people of the early 1900s. They want to see Uncle Tom's Cabin. I'm trying to think what else is here. It's interesting. So, unfortunately, they have the film studios all moved to Hollywood, yeah, right? But you had them all over. You had one in Rochester. You had one in New Rochelle. You had a bunch of them there. But eventually, I guess California was the place to be at one time. But overall, just a great book. It's fascinating. There's so many guys, I didn't mention it here, who came up with one little thing that then was added. Okay, and of course the drama of everyone's ripping each other off and claiming they invented everything. But hey, that's how it goes. And I did not know about these panoramas, right? These cycloramas. But recommended book somehow if you get your hand on this. Okay. film, right? What do the Chinese? What do the Chinese call them? The Chinese have a name for them, right? Electric shadows. Fascinating. I still love film, man. I don't care if it's the end, if it's wrought, if what it may have wrought. I don't care. It was part of that seeking nature of Western man. Thank you very much. That's not to say that others didn't take it to another level. Like I said, the Chinese. But anyway, enough. This is Before Hollywood. Right. Paul Clee. Great book.